Hi, welcome back to Pleased to Dwell. We're working our way through the order of events and presentation in Pleased to Dwell. But whether you're following along with the book or without the book doesn't really matter for this series. It's just a great time to prepare our hearts for Christmas, for the coming of Jesus, the Son of God, the Messiah, the Christ. And so at this point, we're early in the month of December, we're early in the book, we're thinking about the Old Testament anticipation of this coming deliverer, the one who was promised, but also the one who seems to encounter his people in the Old Testament face to face on a really quite an incredible number of occasions. And so we have been anticipating or working through the offices. Just started that last time with the prophet. Now we're going to look at the priest. And these titles or anointed offices are really key to understanding who this deliverer is going to be. So he's a prophet like Moses, someone who represents God to the people. He speaks for God to the people. That's the role of the prophet. But now we come to the role of the priest. The role of the priest is kind of the opposite, if you like, of the prophet. The priest is the one who is to represent sinful people to God. The priest goes on behalf of the people before God to offer sacrifices. Now, it should be no surprise as we walk our way through the Old Testament to realize that sin is a key part of the story. The fascinating and beautiful thing is that as humans sin, God moves towards us. That was true in the garden as God moved towards Adam and Eve. It was true in the books of Moses. The people sinned and God made promise to them and moved towards them. And so now as we think about the priest, we've got a couple of times in the Old Testament where God is anticipating that he would send the priest to his people. So let's look at the key one, and this is quite an obscure one. It comes right at the beginning of the book of Samuel. So after Joshua had led the people into the promised land, things kind of descend after Joshua. You got the time of the judges, just a disastrous time. And at the end of the time of the judges, we come to the beginning of the book of Samuel. The priest at that point is Eli, and the priesthood is in a total mess. But a prophet comes to Eli, and in the midst of his rebuke of his kind of family mess that he'd created, you get this statement: "Then I will raise up a faithful priest for myself." This is God speaking through the prophet. I will raise up a faithful priest. He will do whatever is in my heart and mind. I will establish a lasting dynasty for him. So this faithful priest is key. He's connected to God in a unique way, and God is going to raise him up and establish his dynasty. This is kind of similar language, I suppose, to the prophet language in Deuteronomy 18. God's going to do it. He is going to be significant, this one that he will send. But this isn't the only place, and this really is obscure. If you read through this section, you'll be sort of scratching your head a little bit, and you perhaps want to check out the book. I don't want to push the book too hard, but check out the book to get an explanation of that. But there's also another occasion that perhaps is more familiar. Psalm 110. And in Psalm 110, famous psalm that's quoted many times in the New Testament, you've got the Lord, in verse 1 there, speaking to David's Lord. So there's a conversation taking place in heaven. And so the Father speaking to the Son is the only way I can make sense of this. And he says, "Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. The Lord will extend your mighty scepter from Zion." And so he's describing a kingly role. All right, we're going to see the king in the next video. But in the midst of this psalm, right in the middle, comes verse 4. And right in the middle, he says, "The Lord has sworn an oath and will not take it back. You are a priest forever, according to the order or the pattern of Melchizedek." This is a kind of out of the blue statement to this coming king where God says you're going to be a priest. And so as we're coming up towards Christmas, we're coming up towards the coming of this deliverer, let's celebrate the fact that he is a prophet and a priest. He doesn't just represent and reveal God to us, he represents sinners like us to a perfect and holy God. That's why Jesus came, wasn't it? Not only to reveal God, but to rescue us from our sin. So here's a little quote from the book. The great sin problem of Genesis 3 was not resolved by the priestly system made up of sinful men, but the solution would ultimately be a priestly one, only this priest would be altogether different. He had to be the promised anointed one himself, the faithful priest who alone could make the necessary sacrifice to atone for the sin of humanity. Thanks for watching. We've seen the prophet, we've seen the priest. Next time we'll think about the coming king.